There's a deck that I built that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, so let's talk about it today. Now, this deck has been a bit of a nuisance, and it's not for my opponents, it's mostly been for me. But before I get into the issues of the deck, I guess I should talk about the deck itself. The commander of this deck is Peregrine Took, who has an ability where if I make a token, I also make a food token, and then he has another ability where if you sacrifice 3 food tokens, you draw a card. Now, the deck is a bit of a gimmicky deck. Let's see if you guys can figure it out. Here's your first clue right here, Nantuko Shrine, which has the ability whenever a player plays a spell, that player puts X 1/1 green squirrel creature tokens into play, where X is the number of cards in all graveyards with the same name as that spell. I'm sure a lot of you have already guessed it just based off of that, but here's clue number 2, Spellweaver Helix, which has an imprint ability. When Spellweaver Helix comes into play, you can exile 2 sorcery cards from a graveyard from the game. Whenever a player casts a card, if it has the same name as one of the cards exiled with this artifact, you may copy the other. If you do, you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Clue number 3 is Locket of Yesterdays. Usually a specific type of deck wants this card, but spells you cast cost 1 less to play for each card with the same name as the spell in your graveyard. And then finally, Thrumming Stone. This is the cornerstone of all of these types of decks, which gives spells you cast Ripple 4, which basically says whenever you cast a spell, you may look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you can cast any cards with the same name as the spell you're casting. Now, if you guessed that this is a Slime Against Humanity deck, you are correct. See, Slime Against Humanity has an interesting interaction with Peregrine Took. I guess I should tell you what Slime Against Humanity does. Create a 0/0 green ooze creature token with trample. Put X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is 2 plus the total number of cards you own in exile and in your graveyard that are oozes or are named Slime Against Humanity. And the important part, a deck can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity. So this deck is running 25 copies of Slime Against Humanity, because Slime Against Humanity has an interesting interaction with Peregrine Took. You see, Peregrine Took's ability is something called a replacement effect, and the way that those work is that they look for specific events and then they modify those events when they happen. But they only modify the event and not the entire effect. So the event of creating a 0/0 green slime creature token with trample is modified to create that slime and a food token. But the rest of Slime Against Humanity's effect is going to take place as well. We're going to have to carry out the further instructions just with the modified event. What this means is that we'll put +1/+1 counters on the slime token and on the food token. Now, does this make the food tokens also creatures and also have trample and also be green? No. They're just going to be regular food tokens with +1/+1 counters on them. So why is this important? Well, there's another gimmick to the deck that uses Titania's Song to try to win the game. Titania's Song says each non-creature artifact loses all abilities and becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness, each equal to its mana value. If this enchantment leaves the battlefield, this effect continues until end of turn, which is such a weird thing to have on an enchantment. It's a static ability that continues to persist even when it leaves the battlefield until the end of turn. It's super weird. But anyways, the idea is to flood the board with a bunch of unanimated tokens with counters on them, and then surprise our opponents by dropping Titania's Song and swinging out for lethal. Those food tokens will be 0/0 since they don't have a mana value, but they have the counters on them that they got put on from the Slime Against Humanity. We're also running things like Academy Manufactor, so every time I'm making a food, I'm also making a clue and a treasure. And yes, those will also have the +1/+1 counters on them as well. So now you might ask, what's the issue? That sounds like a fun idea, and it's fun in theory, but in practice, it's not quite as fun. You see, the issue isn't exactly that it doesn't work well, the issue is that it's very hard to track. Anyone that's played a +1/+1 counter deck or a token deck knows that there's a lot of tracking involved when doing all of that. For token decks, the board state gets pretty cluttered, and so you have to stack a bunch of cards on top of each other. And for +1/+1 counter decks, you're just whipping out all these dice all the time. You have to tick some up, tick some down, take some off, put one on everything, which takes forever to just put those dice on everything. It's a hassle. And with this deck, it's a lot more annoying because the tokens are different, so we have to track them separately, and we still have to track the counters on them. And because I'm trying to produce as much tokens as possible, I quickly run out of space on the board because of all these tokens with dice on them that I can't stack on top of each other. And it's a shame because I traded with all these people online for these slimes, and I took all this time to put this deck together only to find that in actual gameplay, it's kind of annoying to play. But I didn't want to give up on this, so I place tested a little more to see if I could figure out a way to make this a little bit less cumbersome. My first idea was 3D printing something to be able to track all this stuff, but it still runs into a similar issue with the dice where I can't really stack them on top of each other. Another idea I've tried is dry erase tokens. tokens, and that one's a little better, but it's still annoying to just draw everything out, keep separate food, have separate oozes, and then wiping and erasing all of that at the end. It's still a little bit of a hassle. And it wasn't until I played at a buddy's place recently where the idea just struck me for a very brilliant, elegant solution. You see, we were playing a game of Commander and he needed a token. And he likes to collect and buy a bunch of playing cards that he never really uses, so he thought he should just use them as a token. But then seeing him do this, I realized playing cards have numbers printed on them already. They even increase in numerical order, and there's 4 sets of them because there's 4 different suits, which is super useful because when I make that ooze, I also make a clue, food, and treasure with Academy Manufactor out. That's 4 different tokens, 1 for each suit. It's perfect. And the first slime always starts with 2 counters on it. I don't even need the 1 counter on it, so the ace, I just make it a 14. So I think this is it. This is the perfect solution for this deck right here. They're numerical, they're stackable, you're able to distinguish between them. I will say though, it could be a little bit tricky trying to keep track of which one is which. Like if I started a game and I said hearts are slimes and spades is food, then I have to remember and keep track of those differences. And if I end up using the other colors, then I have to remember that those are separate things too. So it's not perfect, but I think this is the best option that I've got so far. And I got to try playtesting it this way and it worked out pretty good. Now the only annoying thing is that I need to figure out how to make this deck actually be good, but that's less of a logistics problem. That's more of a problem of deck building. I do want to point out if you're running these cards, they're probably pretty useless in your deck. They're both very similar effects where if a creature of certain power enters the battlefield, you draw a card. But I came to the realization that when you create the slimes, you create them as 0/0s every time, and then you put counters on them. They're not entering as creatures with 3 power or greater, they're entering as a creature with 0 power and then getting counters put on them. So they would never trigger those kinds of effects, so they're pretty useless in the deck. And I noticed on EDH Rec that a lot of decks are running these cards in there when they don't work. But anyways, I just wanted to share my janky little deck idea and my janky little solution for it. If you want to check out this deck list, you can check it out below. I think there's still a lot of work I need to do to make this up to speed, up to snuff. If you got any suggestions, feel free to leave a comment. Tell me what you guys think about the solution. If you got a better idea, I would love to hear that as well. But yeah, that's gonna be it.